Welcome everyone to another episode of Exploring Concept Art with me, your host, Jason Etienne. So this is carrying on from the session that I'm doing with the students at the moment, the Iceworld project. And in this session, looking at creating or bringing together all the elements that the students have been working on. So from the environment, through to character, through to the asset or artifact that they're going to put in their game. So what I'm doing here is I'm just really I've already kind of sketched out an environment, a kind of slab as it were, and it's going to be a sort of temple scene, and you'll see there I've kind of got steps leading up, and I've got like the artifact in the middle and the character. What I'm doing here though at the moment is just a little bit of photo bashing. So I've taken some photographic reference, I've put that into the drawing. I've put like a sort of an artistic effect on there, dry brush, but it's really just for the values and the colours. You'll see as the video progresses, what I'm doing is essentially I just kind of wanted to get that in there just to sort of start off, and then I start working into that with the smudge brush and you know, with the colour picker and all that kind of stuff. So I'm putting some pillars in here, just generally kind of blocking it out. I'm trying to resist putting in too much detail. It's mainly just really to try and kind of get an idea of structure, and I tend to do this, I tend to kind of flip back and forth. You may indeed do this as well, where I'll kind of work on a little bit of the drawing, then I'll move off and I'll work on something else. So it's kind of, it builds up. I'll never kind of stay on one part of the drawing. I find that kind of I get a little bit impatient. I want to kind of, and also a little bit kind of fatigued if I've been working on something for a while. So it's good for you as an artist to kind of move on to something else in the drawing, and even come back, sometimes do a drawing and then sort of come back to it at a later stage. So I'm doing a combination of using the smudge tool, I'm using the brush tool. I use brush 14 with shape dynamics and scatter on there. You'll find that in the brush section in one of the little pots, in one of the little kind of items at the side of the screen. And then I sort of kind of put like a background of black, and then working on the top with this kind of stone color. It's a kind of I don't know, it's kind of almost like a beige, but it's basically just sampled from the stone. And then I'm kind of emulating that kind of that dry stone wall kind of effect. So I'm working on the premises. This is kind of like the remains of an old temple, and what we've got here is kind of brick that's been laid, so without any cement, any mortar. It's purely bricks that are kind of stacked up together. So if you know anything about sort of dry stone walling, not that I know a great amount, I did a bit as a kid, but everything's kind of basically the structure is held together with brick. It supports itself. So again, so like I say, it's an old kind of structure. So I started off with this idea that it's kind of submerged in this kind of swamp. That was the kind of the idea. But obviously this is Iceworld, so I was going to have to kind of maybe start off with this and then working with kind of layers of ice and snow on top of that. So it's kind of partly submerged in this kind of swamp, but obviously it's a frozen land. So you kind of you'd have this eventually. You'd have this kind of frost and stuff over the top. So again, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm just kind of working back and forth, pulling back as well. It's always kind of good to kind of zoom out and zoom back in again. And here, what you can see is what I'm doing is I'm now cutting out with the, I think it's with the polygonal tool or the lasso tool, my own artwork, and then replicating that and then smudging that. Yeah, so I'm using what I've drawn already and working into it, because again, you know, time is of the essence. You know, as future you know, concert artists, as it were, you know, there'll be a lot of emphasis placed on speed, you know, depending on who you're working for. You know, any of these kind of big games companies, you know, hopefully, you know, if you're a student, you know, you'll have a chance to kind of work for these sort of AAA games companies, or perhaps, you know, you'll make your own games. But the emphasis is on speed. Your job, in a sense, is not strictly fine art, although, you know, lots of concept art now that you see online, some amazing stuff, mind-blowing artists, you know, young people who are kind of taking this sort of technology and they're just taking it to 11. It's really truly amazing. So they are works of art, but at the same time, you are designers, so you're working either for a client or working for an art director, and they will want results pretty quick, and your job is really to kind of try and get those results. So yeah, so what I'm doing here is just really, again, blocking parts of it in. I'm going with a sort of very thin layer of black, and then sort of going on with color. So you can see here I'm using the marquee tool and the gradient tool, and here what I'm doing is I'm sort of, again, I'm using the lasso tool. I'm kind of creating these kind of slithers of ice, and I'm building it up. So you'll notice I'm doing everything kind of layers. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm using the layers in Photoshop, but it means that every kind of pass through, I'm just kind of like putting this, so put it on a sort of fairly low opacity, so you get a bit of translucency. Translucency, you get part of the other colours kind of coming through. So you can see there, like that original green that I had there, which could be kind of moss, algae, that kind of thing. I'm overlaying that with the ice. Putting a bit of ice and snow onto the structure now, so you can see it's starting to kind of take shape. Again, I'm not really worrying about lighting. You'll see later on this video that I put like an overlay of dark on this, and I actually use the eraser tool to create the kind of light, but you'll see that a little bit later. In the meantime, all I'm doing really is excuse me, is I'm laying, I'm sort of laying the scene. I'm putting these bits of ice on there, again working quickly. This session that I did for the students, okay, it was kind of most of the day off and on as I was recording this, but it was done very, very quickly. I mean, ideally, right, you'd like to kind of spend days doing something, but in the world of, whether you're working in the games industry or the film industry, you don't have this luxury of time. So the emphasis is really getting the kind of feel of it, and then once you've got that, go. Then you'll put it forward to the art director, the supervising art director. And then you can see here what I'm doing is from the previous video of the asset or the artifact that I created, I'm taking that now and I'm going to put that in the scene. So I'm using artwork. So I could have recreated this again, but it's, again, emphasis on time. So I'm just using that. I put that into my scene, and of course I'll work into it. Now the idea I have with this is I put it on a kind of plinth. It'll be a kind of raised plinth. So this is a runestone. So, and this was presumably be in the kind of, okay, so in the video game, there remains this kind of temple, as it were. You'd have this kind of this runestone in the center, and the priests or the kind of elders would kind of go into this temple, consult the runestone, and then it'd give them the information, what they'd need. So again, after I kind of put it on this plinth, I'm then kind of experimenting with kind of putting like ice on there, just again to kind of give it this sense of three-dimensionality about it, and just kind of using the brush tool and the smudge tool, and sort of putting a bit of shading in there, just so again it just gives it a bit more kind of realism. And then sort of putting a character in there, consulting this runestone. So this character, again, he's wandered through this landscape, he's come across this thing, and maybe he knows what it is, but he's maybe like I decided to kind of make him like into a sort of warrior. So he's got his sword out. He's not necessarily going to use it, but if he's in a kind of hostile environment, chances are that he'd need it at hand. And so what's happening is just kind of consulting this runestone. There's some kind of electricity happening. So you can see here what I've done is I've put like an overlay of black, so on a separate layer, and then what I'm doing is I'm using a soft brush with the eraser tool, and I'm using the brush, but also I'm using the polygonal tool to cut parts of the darker layer that I've put on there out. Yeah, so I'm kind of using it as lighting. It's a very neat trick that you can do. Create your painting first, then drop a dark layer, and then using the eraser tool go over the top, so you're actually revealing the original picture below. It's just quite a handy thing to do, because you can if you go wrong with it, you can just start again. There are many things you can do. It gives you a kind of like, it gives you a way out, and you can, and also it gives you ideas. So as well as doing that, so for example, these icicles kind of hanging down, or this electric that's kind of emanating from this character's hand, you can get ideas from it as well. And that's what we're looking for, when we're doing stuff like this, is to have an initial concept, but also to get ideas along the way. So that's pretty much it. I did work into this a little bit more after the session, just to kind of render it a little bit, but it's effectively, this was kind of like, getting towards really the end of the project. I did have this idea of having almost this kind of like Minority Report, kind of Tony Stark, Iron Man kind of thing, where it touches the runestone and these kind of this kind of holographic, kind of 3D holographic kind of interface appears. I thought it was quite a nice idea, this idea of kind of ancient and kind of futuristic put in there, but I didn't quite like the way that it was going. Somehow, I don't know, maybe I think I didn't sort of explore it as well as I could have done. It just, what I was kind of coming up with, I didn't quite like, so I ended up sort of abandoning this idea. And again, you'll find this, with your own artwork, is that you start off with ideas and something's not quite working, and then you just have to be brave and kind of go, right, that's it, it's not working, I've put like an hour into doing this, it's not working, and then just abandon it. I've mentioned this in previous videos about abandoning ideas and just kind of letting them die. So this is kind of like an idea that I let kind of die. Again, I could probably develop this a little bit more, but I think in its current incarnation it didn't quite work. And then so what I go on to do, you'll see anyway, when the final image that I upload is quite different. It's more like a sort of beam of light emanating from the stone, kind of a bit like the film The Fifth Element at the end, kind of thing. But anyway, that's it. Hopefully you found this video inspiring. It's been insightful for you. Be sure to give me some likes, and be sure to tune in next time, and good luck and have fun with your painting. That's it for now. Bye bye.